Hello everyone, my name is Matthew Hendrick. I am a cloud engineer at DataTenant, and today I'm going to be taking you through the basics of networking in the DataTenant public cloud. To get started, just go to pubcloud.datatenant.com and log in. Once you get logged in, if you go to the server menu and choose create a cloud server, you're brought to a screen where you can select various options for your server, like the region and what operating system you want to use and so forth. And when you get down here to the networking section, you have the choice between a public network and a private network. Now, right off the bat, if you choose public network, you'll see there's one pool of IP addresses that are available for all of our customers. You can click that and choose create your server, and what you're going to see is that the virtual machine has taken a public IP from the pool and assigned it. So now we should just be able to ping that IP address or SSH to that VM or anything we want to do there, right? Let's pull over our terminal and try that. And that's weird. It's not pinging, so I wonder what's going on there. Let's look at our virtual machine. Is it online? Yep, you can see in the console that it booted up. So what gives? Well, the answer is that the security group on this particular virtual network or this particular virtual interface doesn't allow pings inbound. Security groups are kind of like mini firewalls that bind to every individual interface or groups of interfaces, however you want to set it up. And by default, every project has a default security group that allows egress traffic but does not allow ingress traffic. So if you want to allow pings or HTTP traffic in, you have to modify the security group or create a new one. In our case, let's just modify the existing security group. So I go here and I see that it's using the default security group. I'll go to networking, security groups. There's two security groups in here, both called default, one for the south region and one for the central region. I created my virtual machine in the central region, so I'm going to choose this one. We can see that the egress rules are sitting here, but there's nothing to allow pings in, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new rule. I'll say custom protocol, and that protocol is ICMP. I'll give it a quick name. We'll call it allow inbound pings. It's an ingress rule for all ports. Now for the remote option, you can choose to allow this rule to only apply to traffic coming from certain types of sources, including other security groups. In this case, I'm just going to choose CIDR and enter 0.0.0.0/0, which means basically any source traffic. This rule applies to all source traffic. And then I'll choose IPv4 and add rule. And now, if I come back over here and I retest that ping, hey, bang, it's working. So great. So now we have a virtual machine, and it's got an IP address, and it's got security rules that allow traffic to come inbound. But the problem is that this particular rule or this particular virtual machine can only communicate with the internet now. What if I needed other virtual machines sitting here that it can communicate? What if I needed what if I had a database server, or I had an email server or something that needed to be able to communicate with this? Well, in this case, another way of going about setting up networking is to create virtual internal private networks. So let's go over here to back to the cloud menu. Let's go to the networking section and look at our networks. At the moment, we don't have any internal private networks for this particular project. So I'm going to go ahead and click create network. We're still working in the central region, so I'll leave that. And I'm going to make a little default network. We'll call it 192.168.0.0/24. Now, for what it's worth, this name field can be more descriptive. I could call it SQL servers or web servers. I just personally like to have it named the same thing as what I'm going to put as my subnet. So over here in the CIDR field, I'm going to go ahead and put that same information. Now the network's name is 192.168.0.0/24, and that is also the subnet that I'm creating. I'm going to make sure I enable this DHCP option. This is important for a lot of cloud provisioning stuff. If you don't want DHCP enabled on your private networks for some reason, you may want to reach out to support@datatenant.com to get a little additional information about how you can make sure cloud initialization still happens. But by default, DHCP usually is the kind of magic bullet to make that work. In here, in the allocation pools menu, I could narrow the range of what IP addresses the cloud will provision from. Say I just wanted the pool to start at .10 so that the first 9 addresses were reserved for other purposes. I could define that here. And I can put in whatever DNS servers I want to be pushed to my VMs. I'll just put up a couple public DNS servers in there for now. And also static routes. If I want to push any static routes into those VMs as they come online, those can be defined here as well. For now, I'm just going to leave it like this. We'll create a simple little private network. And great, now we have a private network. Let's go ahead and spin up a virtual machine that uses this network. Right here at the networking field, I'm going to unselect the public network option and select the private network option. And there's the little network I created for myself. All right, and now that virtual machine has come up and you can see it has pulled an IP address from my private network. So that's great. I could have 10 virtual machines in here all sharing that network and they would be able to communicate with each other, which is great. But now this virtual machine doesn't have internet access. It's only going to be able to communicate with other virtual machines on that private network. So how do we resolve that? So we can go here into the networking section and we can create a virtual router that will bridge this private network to the internet. If I go here to routers and create router, all I have to do is tell it which region we're talking about, still in the central region, give my router a name, we'll call it internal to internet, and choose which public IP pool we're going to pull for the external side of that router. So I will choose that one, and we'll create the router. Now we have a bridge between our internal network and our external side, and well, I should say actually we almost have a bridge to our external side. We click here on add interface and tell it which network we're trying to connect on the internal side. Add interface. And now if I come back in here and refresh that screen, you'll see that that interface has gone active, and now we have an active bridge virtual router between our internal network and the public internet. You see here this external gateway is SNAT true field that indicates that traffic can now flow automatically out an external gateway to the internet. So now that we have this virtual router set up, there's another really nice feature of the public cloud that I want to show you, which is that here, if I come into that virtual machine I created earlier, this virtual machine now could reach out to the internet if it needed to. It can pull down its patches and whatnot. But what if I want to connect to it from the outside? What if I need to SSH or RDP into this server, for a little bit, or even if I want to leave it up there permanently? It's on an internal private network. How am I going to access it? Well, if I click in here and I go to networking and I see that I have this floating IPs menu, floating IPs are public addresses that can be temporarily or permanently assigned to virtual machines, and the public cloud will NAT the communication between your internal network and the outside world. So let's say I wanted to do that here. I'm going to click create floating IP from the public internet. We'll say this is my temporary SSH IP. And I will select the only port that this virtual machine currently has available and click create. And just like that, it has dropped an IP address onto this virtual machine that is publicly accessible. So if I pull my terminal back over and I ping that address, now I'm able to ping that address, since again that security group is allowing that traffic. If I come in here and I disassociate that from the virtual machine, you'll see I can no longer ping it. So this is a really quick and easy way to assign external accessibility to virtual machines that are in any private network. As long as a virtual router exists that bridges together that temporary or that private network to the outside world, you can drop floating IPs on there, associate them, disassociate them, or delete them from your project altogether if you want to. Now, this has all been useful for creating virtual machines and having them pull down IP addresses and automatically assign them. But what if I need to create additional interfaces to assign to virtual machines? For instance, this first virtual machine I created that has a public IP address. Let's say I want to give that an internal side interface as well. That's also pretty easy to do. I'm just going to go down here to my networking section and go to the ports menu. And here I actually get a list of every interface that I've created from all my networks that I can drill down and look at their details, or I can create a new one. So I'm going to click Create Port. Still working in the central region, talking about adding one from my internal network. I can leave it unspecified and it'll pull down an IP address for me, but I can also choose fixed IP address and I can define a static one. So I'll say 192.168.0.100. And here in my device ID section, I can choose a virtual machine that exists for it to bind to. If I leave MAC address blank, it'll auto-generate one, and I can give it a little descriptive name if I want to. So I'll say internal interface for controller 1. And you can see now that that port's created. And if I come back over here to my server section and look at controller 1, you can already see that it's assigned a second IP address here. And if I go down to my networking area and look, I now have 2 active ports for that virtual machine to use. If I head back to my dashboard, I can see here now that there have been some changes to my overall costs. Certain kinds of ports that use public IP addresses have small charges associated with them. You'll see that at the bill at the end of the month. But that is a good reason to use your to make good use of your virtual routers, because a virtual router only consumes a single public IP address, but you could join hundreds of virtual machines to it for internet access and so forth. It's also a good reason to use those floating IPs I mentioned before, because a single floating IP can be bound and unbound from virtual machines at your leisure. So it is a very versatile tool. If you have any other questions about how to use networking in the public cloud, please feel free to reach out to us at support@datatent.com. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you around the cloud.